The letter arrives on a Tuesday, plain envelope, government seal in the corner, the kind of mail you don't open right away because you already know what it is. A missed inspection sticker, an expired tag, 14 days to comply or a fine gets attached to your name. You already know which side of the window you're on. Not the side where an assistant flags it, a bookkeeper cuts a check, and the matter closes before you even hear about it. The other one. The side where you're standing in the kitchen, holding the paper under a dim light, doing the math in your head before you even finish reading the paragraph, already knowing the answer before the system gives it to you. The statute doesn't change from one person to the next. The experience of the statute changes completely. The law is written once, in one book, for everyone, but it is applied in entirely different worlds. And right now, your world is determined by a number the government already knows about you before you even tear the envelope open. Level 1, the safety net. Let's say that number is negative to $5,000 net worth. You are sitting at the very bottom of the ledger, level 1. At this level, you are not hiding anything from the government because the government does not allow you to. You applied for help, food assistance, a housing subsidy, a cash benefit, and in exchange for that survival, you signed over a version of privacy that people at every level above you keep by default. Caseworkers can ask who lives in your home. They can ask about a partner's income even though their name isn't on your lease. They can request bank statements, pay stubs, utility bills, and school records. You provide it, because the alternative is that the benefit stops, and the benefit is groceries. This is where the machinery finds you. Not dramatically, but in the paperwork that never actually ends. Most programs require recertification every 3, 6, or 12 months. You prove you are poor enough in January. You prove it again in April. You bring the same documents to the same office and explain your entire financial life again from the beginning, out loud, to a stranger with a clipboard, while people wait behind you. Then a good week happens. Someone at work is out sick, and you pick up an extra shift, $40 extra. You don't think about it as a strategic decision, you think about it as rent. 2 weeks later, a letter arrives recalculating your eligibility. The extra shift pushed your reported income over a threshold, and the system doesn't taper you down gradually. It cuts you off. The benefit that was covering $220 a month in groceries disappears because you earned $40 you needed anyway. This is the welfare cliff, and it is not a glitch. It is the shape the rule was built in. The government at this level is not absent. It is everywhere. It knows more about you than almost any other institution in your life, and what it knows is used primarily to verify that you still qualify to be helped. You are not being ignored here. You are being watched closely enough that the watching itself becomes its own kind of exhaustion. Level 2, the ticket and the fine. You claw your way up slightly. You cross into level 2, $5,000 to $30,000 net worth. The constant monitoring slows down, but the architecture of the system shifts from surveillance to enforcement. Imagine you roll through a stop sign at an empty intersection at 6 in the morning. Nobody was there. Nobody was hurt. But an officer was, and now you have a citation for $250. To the city that wrote that fine into its code, $250 is a number chosen to be annoying enough to change behavior without drawing complaints. To you, it is groceries for 2 weeks, or the gap between making rent and not. You don't have $250 sitting in an account waiting for exactly this. Almost nobody at this level does. So you wait, and while you wait, the fine grows. The jurisdiction adds a late penalty after 30 days, and suddenly what started at $250 is now $500, attached to your name in a system that does not forget and does not negotiate. If you still can't pay, the consequence stops being financial and becomes structural. The state suspends your driver's license over unpaid fines, not because you are a danger on the road, but because the license is the only leverage the system has left. Now, the traffic ticket has taken your ability to drive to the job that would have let you pay the traffic ticket. You drive anyway, because the alternative is losing the job, and now you are one traffic stop away from a criminal charge for driving on a suspended license. A charge that did not exist the day you rolled through that empty intersection. This is the part of the system that reveals itself if you sit with it. Equality before the law, in the form of a flat fine, is not actually equal at all. A $250 fine is background noise to a wealthy household. It is a 5-alarm fire to you. The law applies the identical number to both, which sounds fair on paper and functions as an asymmetric weapon in practice. If the penalty for a crime is only a fine, then that law effectively exists only for the people who can't afford to pay it. Everyone else has simply purchased an exemption. Level 3, the standard taxpayer. Eventually, you transition out of survival mode and enter level 3, the standard taxpayer, $30,000 to $100,000 net worth. Here, The government does not ask you for anything, because it has already taken its share before the money ever reaches your hands. Your employer withholds federal tax, state tax, Social Security, and Medicare from every paycheck automatically. You never touch that portion of your income. You never decide whether to pay it. It is simply gone before your direct deposit posts. A silent transaction you experience only as a smaller number than you expected. Come April, you file a standard return. No deductions worth itemizing, no complex corporate structures, no accountant on retainer parsing the tax code. You take the standard deduction because it is, mathematically, the only option that makes sense for someone with no complexity in their finances. The tax code has thousands of pages in it, and functionally none of them apply to you. You interact with perhaps 4. But then there is the hidden ceiling of this tier, the high-earning W-2 trap. Let's say you work harder, climb higher, and your income spikes, lifting your net worth toward $200,000. You aren't a small business owner. You are a highly skilled professional, a corporate manager, an engineer, a senior nurse. On paper, you make great money. But because your income is tied entirely to a W-2 paycheck, you occupy the most aggressively taxed territory in the entire system. You make too much money to qualify for any remaining social safety nets, but you have none of the business write-offs or corporate loops available to the tiers above you. You are paying the absolute maximum percentage of your labor to the state, fully exposed, with zero leverage. At this baseline, you are neither punished nor protected. You are processed. You spend a Tuesday afternoon at the DMV renewing a registration because you don't have a service to stand in line for you. You try to build a deck on your house and discover the zoning code requires a permit, an inspection, and a setback distance that a lawyer would have caught in the first paragraph. But you find out by having the project rejected. You pay in full for the infrastructure, the roads, the schools, and the courthouses, and your relationship with the state is entirely transactional. The transaction is simply not up for negotiation. Level 4, the small business tier. So you decide to break out of the W-2 trap. You take the leap into Level 4, the small business tier, $100,000 to $500,000 net worth. The moment you open a small business or buy a duplex to rent out, the government stops being a background hum and becomes an active variable in every decision you make. Suddenly, you are drowning in a sea of health inspections, business licenses, and commercial property tax assessments that seem to rise faster than your actual revenue. A new local ordinance passes requiring a compliance update you didn't see coming, and you spend 3 nights reading a code that was clearly drafted with a major corporate law firm's help, a law firm you cannot afford to hire yourself. Every single regulation lands on you with its full weight, because you don't have the scale to absorb it the way a massive chain corporation does. The exact same inspection that costs a franchise an afternoon of a compliance officer's time costs you a full day closed and a fee you have to find room for in a budget that doesn't have room. For the first time, you are genuinely subject to the machinery of government in a way that feels adversarial rather than indifferent. Every agency that touches your business treats you as a compliance risk to be checked rather than a constituent to be served. You absorb the cost of every single rule because you have no lobbyist, no industry association paying for someone to soften the next ordinance before it's written. You are building wealth directly against the current, not with it. Level 5, the accredited investor. But if you survive that current long enough, something shifts. You cross the $1 million mark and enter Level 5, the accredited investor, $500,000 to $2 million net worth, somewhere past $1 million in net assets, excluding your primary residence. A switch flips inside a regulatory definition you've never had reason to read before. The Securities and Exchange Commission has a strict category for people like you. And once your balance crosses that line, the government's posture toward you changes from protective to permissive. Below this $1 million line, the government actively restricts what you're legally allowed to invest in. The assumption baked into the law is that you cannot be trusted to evaluate high-risk opportunities, or that you simply cannot afford to lose the money if the bet goes sideways. But above this line, that assumption completely reverses. The government decides you have enough of a financial cushion that it no longer needs to shield you from yourself. Suddenly, private equity funds, hedge funds, pre-IPO share offerings, and venture capital syndications open up to you. These are financial vehicles with massive return profiles that would be completely illegal to market to you just a year earlier. You didn't suddenly get smarter. You didn't take a test or learn something the tier below you doesn't know. Your balance simply crossed a line drawn in a rulebook. The government's protection didn't disappear because you grew wiser. It disappeared because the system stopped worrying about the size of the loss it would have to absorb on your behalf. Level 6, the tax deferral tier. As your assets grow from $2 million toward $10 million, you enter level 6, the tax deferral tier. This is where your income stops looking like a paycheck and starts looking like an asset. Real estate, corporate equity, and investment portfolios. The government's entire posture toward this kind of wealth is structured differently than its posture toward labor, and at this level, you finally have enough of it to notice. If you own investment real estate and decide to sell it, you don't pay capital gains taxes like a normal person would. You utilize a 1031 exchange, which allows you to roll the full proceeds of the sale into a new property, deferring the tax bill indefinitely. Not forever forgiven, just perpetually postponed. You can do this over and over, all the way until death, at which point the tax basis resets for your heirs, and that deferred bill vanishes entirely into thin air. Even outside of real estate, the money your assets make is treated better than the money a worker makes with their hands. Capital gains rates on long-term investments sit meaningfully below the standard income tax brackets that apply to a W-2 paycheck. The system taxes money made by money at a lower rate than money made by labor. That is a deliberate design choice, not an accident, and one that benefits almost nobody below this tier, because almost nobody below this tier has meaningful capital assets to report. At this stage, you hire an estate attorney. Complex trusts are structured, not to break the law, but to route your multi-million-dollar assets cleanly around the estate tax before you die. What your children inherit won't be reduced by a government that otherwise takes a massive cut of a standard worker's paycheck for 30 years. These tools exist in the written code for anyone to use, but using them requires capital most people don't have, and professionals most people can't afford to hire. The tools function, in practice, as a tier of the tax code reserved strictly for the tier of person who already has enough. Level 7. The corporate subsidy. Keep climbing. Cross the $10 million mark, all the way up to $100 million, and you land in level 7, the corporate subsidy. You own something massive now, a manufacturing plant, a major commercial development, an operation so large that local governments can point to it and say the word jobs. And when your wealth reaches that size, the relationship between you and the state inverts entirely. Regulators stop checking up on you, and politicians start courting you. A mayor's office calls you, not to enforce a building code violation, but to ask what it would take to bring your next development project to their city instead of the next county over. They offer you tax increment financing, a mechanism that lets the city divert its own future property tax revenue back into your pocket to subsidize your private construction costs. They offer massive property tax abatements that completely suspend your tax obligations for a decade. They offer direct state grants, public infrastructure improvements paid for with taxpayer bonds, and workforce training subsidies that cover the cost of hiring your employees. The government at this level is actively defunding its own public tax base to compete for your private capital, because the alternative, you building somewhere else, costs the local economy more than the handout does. You are not evading the law here. You are being handed legal exemptions from it, publicly, in a press conference, with the mayor standing right next to you holding a pair of giant scissors at a ribbon cutting. Level 8, the system architect. And then, there is the final tier. Level 8, the system architect, $100 million and beyond. At this peak, you stop experiencing the law as something applied to you, and you start experiencing it as something you have a direct hand in writing. Not personally, not with your own pen, but through the highly legal, highly sophisticated machinery that exists for exactly this purpose. Political action committees, massive campaign contributions, and elite lobbying firms retained on standing annual contracts. Their entire job is to be in the room when a bill is being drafted, not after it's passed. When Congress writes a comprehensive tax or regulatory bill running several thousand pages, buried deep within the text are provisions that read like they apply to the general public, but were carefully negotiated to apply to almost no one but your specific industry. A highly specialized asset depreciation schedule, a precise carve-out for a specific type of energy production, a grandfather clause protecting exactly the corporate structure your business already uses. Nobody has to break a law for this to happen. The law is simply written with your private interests already resting inside it before the first vote is ever called on the House floor, and when the macro system itself breaks, a global financial crisis, a sudden market collapse, the ultimate asymmetry of this tier becomes impossible to miss. Your institutions are deemed too large, too interconnected, too vital to the nation to be allowed to fail. Public money moves instantly to stabilize your corporate equity, while the households at levels 1, 2, and 3 absorb the inflation, the job losses, and the public austerity that follow the rescue. The government does not penalize you for the systemic collapse. It protects you from the economic consequences of it, using resources collected, in no small part, from the exact traffic fines, automated tax withholdings, and shrinking benefit checks of everyone living below you. The cruelty of it isn't personal. That's the part that's hardest to hold. There is no politician somewhere deciding to make your specific week harder. No bureaucrat reviewed your file, looked at your name, and made a malicious choice. The system simply processed the transaction, applied the rule assigned to your bracket, and moved on to the next account. Somewhere right now, a city is spending real public money. Officers, court time, a clerk processing paperwork, to track down a citizen who owes $250 on an unpaid traffic fine. The actual cost of collecting that money may well exceed the fine itself, but the system pursues it relentlessly because the rule doesn't bend for the size of the debt. In the same country, in the same fiscal year, a state government hands a multi-billion-dollar corporation hundreds of millions of dollars in tax abatements and subsidies to convince it to build a facility it was probably going to build somewhere regardless. The law in both cases is the exact same book. It was never the book that changed. The government reads your balance before it decides who you are to the system, a subject to be closely monitored, a taxpayer to be quietly processed, an investor to be trusted, or a partner to be completely protected. The number was always doing the deciding. You were just the one living with the answer.